The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
And joining us live from Detroit, the Motor City, the one, the only, Joseph M Lenard.
Hello. And I was glad to hear him say, because I say over and over and over again, but over and over and over again, some people just want their own confirmation bias. They just automatically dismiss anything that's inconvenient to their narrative. And he repeated like I do. Every side in a conflict engages in propaganda. That's why it is difficult to ferret out truth and facts from fiction and that. Right?
It's true. That's what I keep saying here. Right now, you have to be very careful what you accept as being real or factual, because we're in a time of war. We're being bombarded with all kinds of propaganda from all sides, and it is more sophisticated than it has ever been before. They are messing with your mind.
Yep. I wish somebody would offer me money to peddle certain propaganda, but, nobody's made the offer.
So, Joseph, Julian Assange. Let's talk about that first, just because I know that things have kind of, evolved over there over the last 2 days, 2-day hearing. Assange wasn't in court, wasn't even there by video link because he is ill. He's trying to avoid being extradited to the United States. U.S. officials today said that he should face espionage charges, saying that accusing him of putting innocent lives at risk. They say, U.S. officials say, that he went way beyond journalism, their words, in his bid to solicit, steal, and indiscriminately publish, as they put it, classified U.S. government documents. That was their argument today in court. They say that he isn't, I guess basically, to paraphrase, they're saying he isn't really a journalist.
Yeah, well, I somewhat agree with he went too far. I like Snowden, consider Assange a patriot, right? Part patriot, part traitor, and I appreciate it. I have no doubt that Russia and China think of him the same way also. Right? It's not like Assange has only let out Western secrets. Mm-hmm. So, and obviously here on the West, it'd be nice if he released more stuff exposing them than the things he did exposing us. But there are things that need to be exposed. Where is that line? Where is that fine line? And yes, I do agree. He crossed and put not just lives on the line, but lives were indeed lost because of information he released. So I'm in that ground where, I can understand Assange not wanting to come to the U.S. and some in the U.S. wanting to come here, but others considering him a hero. I stick with that traitorate word. Again, last time I was on, we took gray areas. The person you had the other day questioning something I said while on the show, people want confirmation bias and things that don't fit their narrative, they don't like. They just want to exclude it. Things don't, they have this square peg, and it doesn't matter if it's a round hole, a rectangular hole, an octagonish hole. They're going to jam that damn thing in that hole, right? It's like we've talked about on the show, not to go there, but the easiest example, right? The Jews. Always the Jews. Gotta be the Jews. The Jews did this. The Jews did that. The Jews did everything. They're responsible. Doesn't matter what the question is. That square peg, they're going to jam into that hole. It doesn't matter what the hell it is.
Yeah. I think you probably just made some heads blow up with what you just said.
But journalist. I'm of mixed emotion regarding him. I hope that's come, because again, I see the gray areas.
I think that you can
black and white.
I can respect your opinion on that. This is a difficult issue, a difficult case. It's very complex. I see people on one side or the other, the arguments that they have. I think that in order to strengthen their arguments, they simplify the issue, then they take a very strong stand on it because they're trying to win the argument. I can see both sides. I get it. The whole thing makes me squirm as a journalist. It makes me very uncomfortable. Personally, I have turned away stolen documents, offers of stolen documents in the past, because I don't. Well, I won't get into the particulars of those particular cases, but in the case of Julian Assange, totally different attitude, a different approach, and it's not black and white as far as I am concerned. I see both sides. So I'm reserving my real opinion on this until I get more evidence, more information. It's not a cop-out. I don't feel like I've been, as much as, even though there's all this information out there, there's a lot of opinion out there. There's a lot of narrative. There's a lot of nuanced reporting. And I'm just waiting until I feel comfortable enough with the information that's flowing before I even form an opinion on this. Yeah. I don't know if I ever will form a hard opinion on this case.
I'm in the same camp with you, but it goes back to the whole swastika thing again, right? People get emotionally invested. They react emotionally. They don't want to know or hear if there's any sort of context. By way of example, I've explained how it is more a anti-Russia thing than a pro-Nazi thing in Ukraine. Likewise, or the converse to that is in the Middle East, remember Hitler went to the Lebanon area to meet with the Mufti. There were a lot of Arabs who sided with Nazis because they too seen them as quasi-liberators, right? They were in areas under control of Britain, France, and Spain. So they welcome, be careful what you wish for. You're inviting one evil to help with what you perceive as another evil. But it's different in the Middle East, of course, because a lot of the Islamists are anti-Semites, and indeed the use of the swastika today in the Middle East is not anti-Britain. It is indeed pro-Hitler and killing of Jews. So there's difference. But in the 70s or 80s it was, here in the Detroit area, some of the details are fuzzy because it was a long time ago, but either the Penobscot Building, the Fisher Building, one of the buildings, we didn't think in terms of snowflakes, but there were pathetical corruptness people then. But some snowflakes saw swastikas on a building, right? And like this discussion that I tried to bring context to, they too leaped to conclusions and didn't want to hear any context. A swastika to them, any swastika to them, must be a Nazi swastika. Well, they weren't Nazi swastikas. They were Native American tribe swastikas, but yet people bent over backwards and they were sandblasted from the building rather than have the earnest, honest discussion, because no one wants to hear the facts, the truth, the context, all sides. They just get emotional and ingrained and invested in a
So,
position.
okay. We're going to take a break. Okay? Going to take a break. I'll be right back.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay. The reason I wanted you to come on the program tonight was because of what we were talking about the other night, which was you were saying some stuff about World War II history, and I had asked you about it because somebody had asked me about it, and I just wanted you to come on and explain the context in response to that, and that's really why I thought it was important to bring you on this evening. So there were two things. One, a reference to Finland in World War II. So let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't even remember you. Honestly, I don't even remember you talking about it. Sometimes we just get into stuff. I'm pushing buttons so quickly that I miss things a little bit here and a little bit there. So I don't recall what you said.
Yeah.
So
And
please, do you remember?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times in the moment, I ramble through a lot of things, and yeah, you missed it, but somebody, because of the narrative they want, what I said was inconvenient, so they focused on that. Is it any wonder why Finland today wanted to be and was admitted to NATO? Because Russia invaded Finland before Hitler invaded anyone. And it's also an inconvenient fact that people like to leave out, that Stalin also invaded Poland the same time Hitler invaded Poland. These are inconvenient facts to some people who want to bury Russian history.
Yeah, it would. And I'm just checking this. That's quite correct. November 30th, 1939. Soviet forces invaded Finland with 21 divisions, 450,000 men, bombed Helsinki. They killed about 100 citizens and destroyed more than 50 buildings. There you go.
But yet, somebody was questioning me on that.
Apparently. The other thing, and then World War II came, rolled along after that. The other thing, what was it? I mentioned it to you in the message I sent when I asked. You said, and again, I don't even really remember you saying this because we cover so much stuff. You said the Nazis liberated Ukraine. But I think there's some context that you might add to that to explain what you meant by that.
Yeah, I've been consistent on this all along. Again, it's like the Middle Eastern Arabs also seen the Nazis as liberators from England, Spain, and France. Liberation in the loose sense of the term. But again, be careful what you wish for, right? It is, again, like us siding with Stalin. He wasn't our friend. They weren't our allies, but they were a necessary evil to link up with temporarily to defeat the other evil that was Hitler at the time. The enemy of my enemy notion. I've said this over and over, consistent about the quasi-Nazi brigades in Ukraine. Again, it is more about anti-Russian than it is pro-Nazism, because a lot of Ukrainians did indeed see the Germans coming in to take the Russian boot off their throat. Now, good, bad, smart, I'm not arguing any of that. I'm just saying that there are people there that saw it that way.
At the time, yes, that's true. And you can, because, of course, they didn't know what was coming necessarily, right? You have to remember that there's no 20/20 hindsight at the time. But it's a fact that people in Ukraine at the time, some of them viewed the Nazis coming in as being liberators. They were being told they were being liberated. Tucker Carlson says he's coming to Canada to liberate us. I mean, I don't know what comes of that. Maybe it'll be a liberation. Maybe it'll be an oppression. Who knows when Tucker Carlson gets through with us? I can't predict the future. I can only imagine. Well, I can try to predict it, but it may or may not come to pass. They didn't know what was coming to pass either. And I think, as time went on, they realized, and they've certainly have come to realize, the realities of Nazism and fascism. Is that kind of where we're going with the context on this?
Yeah, but again, the context of the supposed Nazi brigades in Ukraine, they aren't pro-Hitler. They are just, and I've said over and over, wearing a swastika, a Nazi swastika, is stupid, no matter why you're doing it, because people don't care about the context. All they see is that symbol and they leap to conclusions. That's all I'm saying is the context here, that there is gray involved in this. And as you said, we can't judge yesterday by today's standards. They change.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's basically accurate. You can argue one way or the other on whether the guys wearing the Nazi symbols in Ukraine are Nazis or aren't Nazis. One way or the other. I think there are some actual Nazis and people, embracing neo-Nazi ideology in Ukraine. I think they do have a problem. I think we've got some of those people right here in Canada and the United States. They're all over the place, and I even see it.
Absolutely.
Frankly, I see it. Even surprisingly to some in Russia. I see it there. I see a lot of anti-Semitism all over the place. Doesn't matter where you go right now. It is rampant.
That is exactly my point. It is everywhere. That's I said on that last show. Should Putin invade California next? Now, there are many reasons why I'd like to see California flattened and fall into the sea, but the excuse that he's here to denazify is not the real reason. You know, and it's the same with the NATO encroachment that I know you stick by. But Afghanistan, was there any threat of NATO involvement or application there? No. Crimea, not Crimea, Georgia, Chechnya, never any chance they were ever going to be part of NATO or having NATO involvement. My point is history, a pattern of behavior from Russia and that 100-year history with Ukraine. So all these excuses he can make work in the minds of some people who are willing to accept that as an excuse. I just don't buy it as an excuse. And again, Clinton de facto made them a member of NATO. Putin knew this when they gave up their nukes. And like George W. Bush, people love to put all the Iraqi Operation Freedom on him, failing to recognize Bill Clinton signed into law the Iraqi Liberation Act, which made it U.S. policy to remove Saddam. So, you know, again, there's all these little historic details that matter in this discussion, but people want to pick and choose their confirmation bias to their narrative.
Yeah. So, you know, that kind of explains what you were getting at with the comments the other night. And look who's joining us now. By surprise visit, he's back by popular demand. Mr. Michelizzi, how are you, sir?
I am doing good.
Good. I suspect that your head blew up.
My head blew up.
Okay, I'm going to let you guys go. Just leave me out of it. How about that, okay?
Well, I had to get out of bed for this one, Rick. So,
okay, you go ahead, man.
Mr. Leonard, I will agree with you that Russia invaded Finland first, but you aren't going far enough back in history. So you have neglected the fact that there were other issues between Russia and Finland. The one that really made my head blow up, though, was the OUN. And the other night you said a majority of Ukrainians viewed Hitler as liberating Ukraine. My wife is Ukrainian. I know the history. There were a few Ukrainians. I have interviewed people on this historical point many times, former Soviets. The OUN was a small youth group originally. They're Galatians primarily. It was a few Ukrainians viewed Hitler as liberating them from the Soviet Union.
I'm not going to argue the point one way or the other. Some did, some didn't, whether it were few or most or many or several or whatever. My point being that some did. Just like in the Middle East, some viewed Nazis as liberators from Britain, Spain, and France. Do you argue with that?
I won't argue that some, but you have to give context to what you're telling people. When you start talking about you forget, you are forgetting as well. So, you know, you're doing a similar thing as to what you're saying other people have.
Yeah, well, you yourself just said some of Russian sympathy and dissent. I want to argue with it.
But we're talking about an extremely small percentage of people in Ukraine that viewed Hitler as liberator. Very, very small. The same very small groups that they say are Nazis in Ukraine. And I've discussed this point with Rick before. There aren't as many Nazis in Ukraine as most people would lead you to believe. And I've told Rick before, a lot of it is propaganda. And
that's my point. I say, a bit hyperbolic, I'll admit, right? I've said the Putin excuse of denazification is an excuse. It's a convenient excuse.
Well, it's not an excuse. It's a form of justification.
Okay. Let's use that word. That's a better word. Yeah. Thank you. That's a better word. Now, lots of Nazis in California. Should he invade there next? I'm using a bit hyperbolic terminology and language to make a broader point.
But you have to be careful in twisting history a little bit just to make a point. So you have to, you were just, what really made my head blow up is you said people don't look at the context. And my viewpoint is that you didn't look at the context either. You did not look at the context of Finland.
It's I think maybe in fairness, it's difficult to have proper context when, you haven't lived in Ukraine, you're getting your information from history books, media, it's maybe somewhat accurate, but, I think, Kevin, you're bringing, a better look at the whole thing and helping us all understand it. Better, as you did with me earlier today, too, right?
I wasn't reporting both sides. I was providing only context as a counter to the denazification justification. I was only presenting that other side. Now, yes, as Rick says, there are Nazis everywhere. That doesn't mean in every case there isn't also additional contextual information. I was indeed only providing one side. You are right, Kevin. I was purposefully, willfully, and only talking about one side of that issue because the other side has been out there as the reasoning or justification, as well as the NATO encroachment. Like I said, what about Afghanistan? What about Crimea? What about Georgia?
It's the choice of words. It's maybe the words could have been chosen a little bit more carefully. Even what you just said right there, there are Nazis everywhere. That makes it sound like, I know it. You don't mean that there are everybody's a Nazi everywhere. That's not what you mean. No. And so I think that we're all closer together on this subject than maybe people might think. And,
I think so too.
Right. And it's not like, I don't think you meant to make people think that all the Ukrainians all the Ukrainian people thought that the Nazis were liberators. Is it fair that that's not what you meant?
No, I will say, Kevin, well, again, now from the Ukrainian loyalist perspective, not those of Russian descent or ties to Russia or Russian speaking, will view things differently than others who have Russian sympathies in this matter. So they're going to view it somewhat differently. A lot of Ukrainians, then as now, see Russia for 100 years as an oppressor. Some, many, most, I don't care the number. I'm just saying that is true in the Ukrainian mindset of at least the Eastern or the Western Ukrainians. There, I have no doubt, some loyalty to Russia in eastern parts of Ukraine.
Well, again, that kind of comes across as half of Ukraine, but it wasn't half of Ukraine. It was a very small percentage. You're talking maybe 1% of Ukraine. Most Ukrainians, and I have actually lived in and spent a lot of time in Ukraine, not only in prior times, but during current times as well. So you would be surprised how many Ukrainians that are there now who are anti-Ukrainian government. So, we have to, the Chechens. You forgot, you brought up the Chechens tonight. That made my head go boom too. And understand it's 3:30 in the morning here, so I'm not usually up listening to Rick. But the Chechens actually attacked the Soviet Union first. So Russia had a reason to go in there, and it's not justification, but this is where the cause of the problems were and how it ended up being resolved in the end. And now those people are very loyal Russians.
What was the excuse to go in Afghanistan? Have you got an excuse for that one?
I won't give you an excuse for that one.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll also go back to what was the United States' excuse for going in.
Well, that was 9/11, and my goodness, I don't think it was much of an excuse to go into Afghanistan. But that's what happened.
No, it was the domino theory back then. We went in just to oppose Russia's invasion of Afghanistan. We had no vital interest in Afghanistan back then in the 80s, other than to oppose Russia. So I will absolutely agree with you in that regard. It was the domino theory then. But as Rick says, 9/11, yeah, that's a whole other thing. And that is indeed one time NATO Article 5 was invoked. Korea and Vietnam, nothing to do with NATO. Bosnia, Herzegovina, people are conflating UN operations also with NATO operations because it fits a narrative.
Yep.
And you know what, Kevin? I appreciate what you're saying, because as a Canadian, I was horrified when Yaroslav Hunka, the Nazi, appears in Parliament and he's applauded. But at the same time, I know, because I live here in Canada, that the whole country is not a Nazi nation. But the way that story was played out, some were reporting on it as though it was like a proof that Canada is the second coming of Nazi Germany. And it just isn't true, right? It's like, I guess we've got a problem and it's right up there, but, and we do have some problems. I'm not denying that. And it seems to have bubbled to the surface lately in pretty profound ways. But I still don't think that Canada as a whole is a Nazi nation. I think it's like a lot of other places where you have pockets of problems. But I
think there was a lot of ignorance in that.
Yeah, Rick,
yes.
I think you're kind of making my point to some degree. So I guess Putin should invade Canada, denazify it too.
Well, I think that, it worries me that if that's the way the country is painted, it might happen. He might feel like he might watch Fox News or something and go, oh my God, we better invade. And the next thing you know, he's got Tucker Carlson on his left and Jackson Hinkle on his right and Lieutenant Steve Rogers out in front, leading the charge, and he's right in there with them. And the next thing you know, we're liberated. And stranger things have happened, and it's weird times.
So I'm actually going to give a counterpoint to Mr. Leonard's statement there about Putin invading Canada. Well, for no other reason than he's Joe Biden in the United States, I think Joe Biden should invade Canada.
Oh my God! Everybody wants to invade us.
It's the same reason they had over Syria. They have no reason for it.
They're talking about it. It's like it's just like.
Why would Biden want to invade Canada? Justin and Biden are both fascists themselves.
Oh, I don't know, man.
Why does the United States want to fight Iran? Is it because they're supplying weapons to terror cells that are attacking Israel? Well, reality is we were big supporters of Iran and building those same terror groups that are, attacking Israel and the United States over there right now. So,
we helped build the Mujahideen through Osama in Afghanistan. There's no question of that. And yes, we were an ally with Iran until the Shah was overthrown. And it's the same with Iraq, why so many in America were uneasy about the alliance with Saddam, because the Ba'athist Party literally was created out of remnants of the Nazi Party.
But it was the same situation you're accusing Putin of. Why was the Shah overthrown? Because he was an American puppet. Let's start digging into the CIA's deal and regime change here. So at least Putin comes out and he says, I'm doing this because, and there's a lot more reason than Nazis for why Russia went into Ukraine. We can't oversimplify what isn't a simple issue.
That's exactly right. I agree with you. And, this whole denazification thing, I get it, but I also see that one of the main motivations in using that as part of the justification is because it's something that people in their minds can understand as a cliche.
Right. Again,
and that's what governments do when they're selling anything to anybody.
Show anybody a Nazi swastika and no thought is required. Immediate emotional feedback. So Putin, obviously, I don't blame him for using that as one of the justifications, because it's an easy sell to people.
Yep. I'll agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Any comments, Kevin, on the Julian Assange thing today? Have you been looking at it at all?
Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on it. I have one of our colleagues who has made sure I keep an eye on it. So,
yeah.
I'll agree with what you said just a little bit ago, Rick. It's a complex case. I don't honestly believe he went beyond what he should have in reporting what he was given. Did he put the U.S. at risk? Maybe. But, if the guy's been in jail for how many years at this point, and the United States would just as soon bring him back, convict him of treason, and put him to death. But the guy who gave him the documents was pardoned after, 2 years?
Yeah.
It's time to just say the guy's been in jail long enough.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, too. Yeah.
And let me say this from the Russian perspective. Russia has reasons to want Assange tried there and convicted for putting Russian lives at times at risk. Again, people want to just latch on to what is convenient for their narrative, right? Assange has let out a lot of things.
Does Putin want to bring Assange there to put him on trial?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to. I don't know why the U.S. is obsessed with it when he's already in prison. Putin knows better than to bother to go there. But Kevin, you wouldn't agree that Russia also has reasons to be anti-Assange with some of the Russian secrets he let out through WikiLeaks?
Well, let's say that, he's let things out, and, would Putin have the right to take the stance the United States does? Yes. But Russia does not want to extradite him and convict him and put him to death. He's a non-issue for Russia and Russians.
Now,
I live here. I know.
He's in prison. He should be a non-issue for Americans at this point too. But yet Some are obsessed with this. I'm of the Putin mindset on this one. He's a non-issue. Leave it be. I think a lot of Americans want it for the distraction, the Alinsky deflection, to hide their guilt of crimes they've committed. A lot of deep state American government is indeed absolutely corrupt. You're not going to get me to say, oh, the U.S. is great. It's all roses over here. If any idiot got that impression, I don't know how. So I think they're on it just as a deflection.
Kevin, do you think that they want this conviction and extradition and conviction because they're looking for additional deterrence?
I think this is why the United States wants it. I do want to go back to Putin for just a minute. He has actually said that what the United States is doing is not democracy and it is anti-free speech. So, I'm just going to say that Russia has the exact opposite attitude of what you're saying. He's such a non-issue that
you're trying to
he doesn't mean anything to them.
You're trying to paint Putin as a major free speech guy now, right? You expect people to buy that.
I don't care if you buy it or not, but a lot of the viewers actually know that I have more free speech here than I have in the United States. I have very few things I cannot speak publicly about in Russia.
As long as you're towing the Russian line, yeah.
No, I have nothing that I can't speak about here other than the censorship that the West hears about in Russia is solely based around not putting out fake news about the Russian military in the special military operation. I would be arrested if I went out and said the Russian army is slaughtering millions of Ukrainians. That is fake news. It's a lie, and it's not allowed here. So it is a very truth-oriented country. I can go out and I can say anything I want about Vladimir Putin with impunity. So
you just might get poloniumed if you. But so you're saying no Ukrainians have been taken back to Russia to be re-educated. That's all fake news.
Ukrainians have not been brought back to Russia to be re-educated. I will make that statement. Children have not been kidnapped and taken to Russia to be re-educated. Children have been brought back and sent to the Arctic children's camp to get rest and relaxation from a life of war. I have a young lady that Lori has interviewed and I have interviewed from Donetsk who grew up in that. She's a young woman. She is an activist, but she has not been re-educated by Russia. So the only Ukrainians that have been brought back from Ukraine are prisoners of war, and Russia freely exchanges them with Ukraine, except it seems Ukraine likes to shoot down the planes full of Ukrainian POWs being returned.
Yeah, well, that was tragic. Why that happened, I don't know.
Neither do I.
Yeah, that's whether they thought that it was, a plane full of something other than prisoners, improper communication, or intentional. Why would they shoot down a plane full of their own POWs is beyond me. Unless I guess there would be a theory that they were trying to do it to make it. I don't know, man. That blows my mind.
Again,
that whole thing.
Every side peddles propaganda, and quite frankly, I think I've heard some recently here from Kevin. But did they shoot it down to try to blame Russia? Again, every side engages in propaganda and sometimes false flags. I'm not the one trying to take complete one side or the other here.
Oh, but you are. You are saying Russia is this way, Putin is this way. You are taking sides when you make statements like that.
I am absolutely positively saying Ukraine was not a threat to Russia and was invaded unprovoked. Period. There is no excuse. There is no justification. So there is indeed a good side, the Ukrainians, and a bad side, the Russians. But
you are oversimplifying the issue.
And
that's the issue I have is the other night, I'm the one who said to Rick that you were incorrect on your statements. So, I'll just put that out there. That's why he brought it up to you tonight.
Because
you are doing what you accuse other people of. You are looking at this much when the story is actually this big.
You are confirmation biasing. You are presenting a narrative from the Russian perspective only. I am countering that.
I have lived on both sides of the pond.
And I try to see both sides, and I see, the Russian Oliver Stone version, right? And I see the, I understand the NATO, BBC, CBC, ABC version. I mix them all together, and I kind of, and then I always try to understand the perspectives. I have my own view. And as I said, I don't think it ever had to happen. And it was a stupid thing for NATO to do. And I think Richard Nixon was right back in the 90s when he said that, the West had an opportunity to help Russia make freedom work after the fall of the Berlin Wall, but it was a missed opportunity. The West never wanted to embrace that. Instead, they kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And this is where we've come to. And,
I agree with you up until that last point, but I have said over and over again, Biden corrupt, Trudeau corrupt, Zelensky corrupt. Are you going to try to peddle me Putin is just sweet as roses?
Don't put words in my mouth. I never said that.
I'm asking a question.
And I'm in Russia. Is Putin corrupt? I don't know.
Oh, well, there's a safe answer. Yeah, and all the polonium deaths, those were just coincidental and accidental, I suppose. Give us another safe answer.
So you want me to take a side on something that I don't have enough knowledge to take a side on?
It's convenient for you to ignore. Convenient.
Well,
very convenient.
So is what I'm going to point out is you are once again doing what I took issue with when you were on the other night, and why I got out of bed to get on here with you is you are being not only biased, but opinionated as well. You have an opinion.
I don't deny it. I'm not a Zelensky apologist. I'm not a Biden apologist, but you are clearly a Putin apologist.
You certainly come off as a Zelensky apologist.
I've said over and over how corrupt he is and that no money should be sent because a lot of that is money laundering. Over and over and over. I pointed to example, indeed, Biden corrupt, Zelensky corrupt. Conveniently, I'm not sure. I might get a polonium pill if I take a side.
Unlike you, I don't blow smoke out my ass when I don't have knowledge of something. You are making statements over and over about stuff you obviously have not looked at and have no real information on. So you're the one who's being an apologist on many things that you have no knowledge of.
I leave it to the audience to clearly decide. I have talked over and over about corruption on all sides and issues with all sides. You're a pure apologist.
It really comes down to it, and we're not going to resolve this tonight.
No, of course we're not.
But it's like it's a view of sovereignty, right? And how history plays into that, or current political situation. should Ukraine have had the right to self-determination as a sovereign nation? Did Russia have the right to invade? Or was Ukraine truly a sovereign nation? Or had it been, was it the victim of a U.S. military, CIA coup, right? A color revolution. It depends on how you view it. And I do see the different sides. People have to make up their own minds, I guess. And if you're of one mind or the other, then fireworks.
Yeah, I agree. There are different perspectives, and I have more than one occasion spoken to both perspectives. Everything I'm saying here tonight is just indeed the one side. I'm countering Kevin's Putin apologist.
You know, that is the safe argument to go to when you have no real knowledge about what you're talking
and
about.
And that's the convenient dodge, convenient Alinsky attack dodge deflection. Thank you.
So you're welcome, because I have just accused you of doing what you're accusing me of. So that's reality. It is a convenient dodge for you to say Kevin is an apologist. I actually worked in propaganda for the United States Department of Defense. So I know what propaganda is. I know what operations have gone on behind the scenes with Ukraine. I worked on planning the invasion of Ukraine back before it was even in Putin's mind. You know, the color revolution was a pure CIA operation. When they threw, put in the current government, that was a CIA operation.
And you're not going to hear me argue against that.
Well, so did Russia have a right to go in?
No.
The United States overthrew a legally elected government,
as if
and then started putting NATO troops in and building NATO military bases on Ukrainian territory, all while claiming they were just training grounds for NATO forces.
Again, which Putin knew back in the 90s when Bill Clinton made Ukraine a de facto nation, then when they gave up the nukes, which they never should have done, as protection against a Putin aggression that everybody on the planet knew was coming. Putin has said he wants to put back together the Soviet Union. Or do you deny that?
That is a lie.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Uh-huh.
You go, and you have now just taken a statement that was this long and you've cut it up into a piece this big. This is where people like you get the wrong idea about what has or hasn't been done, because you're an anti-Russian Russophobe.
How was Ukraine any threat to Russia?
It's not that Ukraine was the threat to Russia, it's that NATO
was the threat to Russia.
Well, NATO's invaded who?
I'm going to answer your question. Don't try to talk over me. How? Let me put it to you this way. If Russia put nukes in Mexico, would the United States consider that a threat?
That's directly Russia. Yes.
Okay. We helped them get
rid of the nukes.
And would the United States invade Mexico then? Probably.
No. We've scaled
because
back
the United States is
Cuba.
so good. The United States is so good about respecting boundaries, aren't they?
I wouldn't ever hear me say that. But again,
well, you implied that.
NATO is not a threat as a defensive pact to any nation. Never, ever has NATO been enacted.
NATO is not a defensive pact.
Other than 9/11.
No, NATO is not a defensive pact.
Why did Finland just join NATO? Because they know Russia is the threat.
Well, Why is Russia a threat to them joining NATO, but Ukraine joining NATO isn't a threat to Russia? So you're talking in circles on this one. So you can't. No, let me finish. Don't cut me off. Cutting people off is a sign of somebody who's already in trouble with their arguments. So Finland joined NATO because Russia was a threat to them. Well, so then we have to put the shoe on the other foot and then say, well, then obviously NATO being in Ukraine was a threat to Russia.
A defensive alliance is never what country has NATO invaded other than Afghanistan after 9/11? I named the nations that Russia invaded. Again, Korea and Vietnam were not NATO pact things. NATO nations were involved, but it was not a NATO thing.
So let's talk to my Serbian friends.
That was a UN resolution.
No, they did not have UN backing to go in there. That was a US NATO military operation going in and bombing them, killing people. The same situation as you're accusing Russia of. So let's get our facts straight before we go into things like that. Who is in there right now propping up Kosovo, which is a breakaway region? Russia invaded Ukraine and stole it from Ukraine, by taking Crimea. Okay, what is Kosovo? It is a NATO-backed breakaway republic. Same situation. You can't say Russia did this unless you also say the United States did this. It doesn't justify what either side has done, but let's put all of the facts out to people. Let's not say, this little piece, Putin is bad. Let's also take the other piece and say, he isn't doing anything that the other side's not doing. And this is the problem with the propaganda that comes out of both sides, really, is they skew people's minds. But blocking news in the West, I have nothing blocked here other than BBC and CNN. They've been blocked here.
Nothing blocked but that, right? You just admitted you block, you censor. You just admitted it. I don't deny we have censorship here. I don't deny it. You just said we don't have it, but then gave an example of censorship.
Well, yes, we blocked CNN and BBC here. Do people still see it if they want to? Absolutely. It doesn't stop anyone from actually seeing it. It was a symbolic gesture because of what they were putting forth on their news. However, how much Russian news can you actually see over there? Zero.
A whole channel dedicated to it. Russia Today.
Russia Today has been taken off the air in most Western countries.
Yeah,
also, Al Jazeera News.
It's off the air here. You can get it online if you really work at it.
If you really work at it, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. You're right. It has been taken off the air here. Kevin, thank you.
I'm scrolling through my dish right now to check if Russia Today is still on it, because it was just the last couple of years ago. Al Jazeera
years ago, everything was on over there.
A couple of years ago.
So you're not going to get an argument from me that there's censorship going on over here. Not going to get an argument.
There is a heck of a lot more censorship going on over there than there is here.
Yeah, well, we're pretty crushed here. They censor the heck out of me.
Well, yeah. It's because you're an everything apologist.
I guess so. All right. Well, I'm glad that you guys are friends again.
Well, and for the record, again, because I deal in facts, I deal in honesty, I don't blow smoke, even though he's accusing me of it. I'm scrolling through, and indeed, I do not see Russia Today on my dish. That doesn't mean it's being censored. It just means Dish Network decided to not offer it as part of their package anymore. But I used to watch it on occasion for decades to get the Russian propaganda side.
It was banned because of when the war or special military operation, whatever you want to call it, erupted in Ukraine.
It may have been removed because of that. I don't know. That is probably, potentially, a good probability to be true.
Yep, it is the case. Same thing with Sputnik being removed from Western sources. So, was removing the BBC and CNN from Russia a tit-for-tat thing? Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's banned here in Canada. You can't get it on cable systems. They're not allowed to put it up. They took it down a while ago.
That may be true of Al
You have
Jazeera,
nobody
too.
in Canada anymore that you can watch other than, the Canadian government channel.
Yeah, CBC, CTV, Global. And
we absolutely agree on that.
Yeah.
And like we reported the other day, Fascist Book deciding to try to float the notion of applying Canadian law in the U.S. to block inconvenient information they prefer to hide before the upcoming election to help the fascocrats in the United States.
Well, it's getting to the point now where actually Canada may no longer soon have access to Pornhub. Because the Canadian government's now going after Pornhub.
Whoa! Yeah, now there'll be a revolt now.
Now here's the irony in that Pornhub is a Canadian company. It is, but the Canadian government is getting ready to pass new laws for age verification, and it's basically new censorship. And so Pornhub is looking at just cutting off access to their service in Canada because they're afraid they're going to end up violating this new censorship law. So, yeah.
Yeah, I seen someone in the chat say something about fake war coverage from CNN. Well, I don't trust CNN for anything. That hysteria. They were literally showing hospitals with crash test dummies as supposed patients. So, do I believe anything out of CNN? No. Pro-America or pro-Russian? I don't believe anything out of CNN.
Well, they do what they need to do to get people to come in and watch. Rick and I talked about this earlier. Do people go and do they watch the news about the firemen taking the cat out of the tree, or do they go and watch the bloody car crash? Unfortunately, people want to see the bloody car crash. I would prefer seeing the firemen take the cat out of the tree. I think the world needs more of that these days.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, we could use some more positivity, some good news stories, but people like the tragedy and the blood and the gore. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
That's the way she works in the news business, folks. That's right. Anything else you want to add, Kevin?
Nope. I'm going to go back to bed and let you gentlemen go at it.
All right. Good night, Kevin. Have a good sleep.
Thanks, Joseph. And no hard feelings. Yes, no. I accused you of blowing smoke mainly because you accused me of being a propagandist. I will freely admit you're not blowing smoke. If you admit that I'm not what did you put it? Not a propagandist.
I do not think in any way, shape, or form you are purposefully, willfully being a Putin apologist, propagandist. I don't think that. I think you are succumbing to a one-sided narrative because of where you come from. You know, I understand the difference of what I'm saying. I think you're being fooled, like you, no doubt, think I'm being fooled. Can we agree with that?
We can agree with that.
Yeah, okay.
We are both coming from our own biases.
Okay, see, that's
All right,
great.
common ground.
Virtual
We-
shaking of
we
the
have
hand.
common
Yeah.
ground. Ladies and gentlemen.
And it's like somebody in the chat tried to say, "Whoa, Joe's great now that he finally remembers he's on our side." Well, I try to report all sides. But that doesn't mean I don't take an opinion or a side. I do. I don't deny that.
Yep.
All right, good
And
conversation.
I piss people off on Rick's show all the time because I will say something that is inconvenient for what the listener wants confirmation bias wise to hear.
That's your job. Piss people off.
Yeah, I say it every time. I'm here. I'm ready to piss people off. If I haven't pissed off everybody in something I've said, I don't feel like I've done.
No. And now he's censored.
No. Yep. Self-censorship.
Frozen. Frozen. Kevin, I'm going to let you go back to bed, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks.
you calling. Thanks,
guys.
Thanks for
your
popping in.
support out there.
Yeah.
Rick, thanks. Talk
Thank
to you later.
See ya. Bye. And Joseph, you're frozen, man. You're frozen. Other side of this.
Fighting the Great Reset. By leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind.